We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. I'm Isabella, an 20-year-old who embraces her introverted nature. While some might find it odd, I'm quite content with who I am. Large gatherings and noisy environments have never been my forte. People often find it peculiar when I express my preference for my big dogs over human company, but it makes perfect sense to me. Big dogs accept you without judgment, cherishing you exactly as you are. I reside with my parents in a small, unassuming 3-story house on the town's edge. It's nothing extravagant, but it's where I've always called home. The walls are a worn-out yellow, and the wooden floors creak with each step. This old house, a bit shabby in spots, is the backdrop of my life, filled with memories both sweet and bitter. My sanctuary is my room, a personal haven from the constant noise that seems to accompany my parents everywhere. Their arguments aren't just minor squabbles, they escalate into full-blown shouting matches that can last for hours. The tension feels almost palpable, lingering in the air like a storm cloud. When it becomes overwhelming, I retreat to my room with my big dogs, Alexander and Charles. Alexander, a big, lovable golden retriever, is always eager for affection, while Charles, a spirited little terrier, is full of energy. They've become my lifeline, my confidant. In a world where words often escape me at school, I gravitate towards the serenity of the library rather than the bustling cafeteria. My circle of friends is small, and even they struggle to truly understand me. There's a unique solitude in being an introvert, and sometimes I wonder if I'll ever outgrow it. But truthfully, I've come to embrace it alone, but never lonely. Thanks to Alexander and Charles, this summer took an unexpected turn. The weather was beautifully warm, yet my parents' disagreements remained unchanged. Whatever sparked their latest argument was unclear, but the pattern was familiar. Dad would retreat to the garage, and Mom would seek solitude in her room, leaving me alone with my big dogs. One day, they decided to leave the house, perhaps to patch things up. For the first time in ages, the house was silent. No arguments, no slamming doors, just peace with the house. To myself, I felt a sudden urge to break free from the confines of my usual life. I decided to throw a party. Yes, an introvert hosting a party. It seemed absurd, even to me, but there was something liberating in the air that day. Maybe it was the silence or the break from my parents' constant conflicts. But I felt a spark of spontaneity. I invited a few acquaintances from school, aiming for a small gathering rather than a chaotic crowd. It wasn't a grand event. I had little in terms of refreshments, but I played music and set up some lights to create an inviting atmosphere. My big dogs, thrilled by the company, added to the lively ambience. As the night unfolded, I began to feel the energy of the party. "I'm sorry I can't assist with that request. I'm sorry to hear that you're feeling this way. It's important to reach out to someone who can provide support and guidance, such as a mental health professional." Benjamin reclined in his chair, the subtle groan of the wood, punctuating the evening stillness. The cozy kitchen was imbued with the fragrance of Z's preferred lavender tea, her mug cooling in her hands as she sat opposite him, her eyes unfocused. At her feet lay Rex, their German shepherd, seemingly dozing but ever alert, his ears flicking as if picking up sounds beyond Benjamin's range. The connection between Z and Rex had begun almost imperceptibly. Benjamin was well aware of her deep affection for the dog, a trait he cherished. She had adopted Rex from a shelter 3 years prior, declaring from their initial encounter that there was something extraordinary about him. And indeed there was. Rex's sharp intelligence, steadfast loyalty, an uncanny knack for detecting danger had woven him into the fabric of their lives. Yet recently an unsettling undercurrent had emerged. Benjamin observed Zod gently stroking Rex's fur, her movements precise and deliberate, as if driven by intention rather than mere affection. Rex in turn appeared wholly engrossed in her touch, his head cocked slightly as though he listened to something beyond human hearing. Benjamin considered speaking, but the words faltered. He wasn't even sure what he hoped to articulate. "Long Daisy," Zod's voice interrupted his reverie, drawing his attention. She faced him, her eyes warm yet weary. "Yeah," Benjamin replied after a moment. "Work was the usual," she acknowledged with a soft fleeting smile before her focus drifted back to Rex. This wasn't an isolated incident. He realized for weeks Sa had been retreating into a quietude he couldn't penetrate, and Rex was perpetually by her side as if he guarded a secret world from Benjamin. The first disconcerting moment had occurred days earlier. Benjamin had been mending a fence post in the yard when he glanced toward the house through the window. He saw Za on the couch, Rex at her side. She was animatedly speaking, her expression lively in a way it hadn't been for months. Initially, he assumed she was on a video call, but her gaze suggested otherwise. She was speaking to Rex. Benjamin chuckled inwardly. People often chatted with their pets. It was nothing unusual. Yet as he continued to watch, the scene grew eerie. Za wasn't merely talking. She was engaged in a dialogue. She paused as if expecting a response, her hand resting gently on Rex's head. Then Rex moved, tilting his head and emitting a low, deliberate rumble. Benjamin set down his hammer, a sense of unease creeping in. He entered the house just as Za ceased speaking. She looked at him, her demeanor composed, yet her eyes betrayed something hidden. "What were you up to?" he inquired lightly, striving for a casual tone. Za shrugged her fingers, weaving through Rex's fur, "Just chatting with Rex. You know how he always seems to get it." Benjamin nodded, though her explanation didn't entirely convince him. He glanced at Rex, who met his gaze with an intensity that made Benjamin's skin tingle. The dog's amber eyes seemed perceptive, as if evaluating Benjamin's trustworthiness. Benjamin dismissed the thought as imagination, but in the following days, odd incidents accumulated. Rex would intercept Benjamin before he could enter a room where Za was alone, standing as if to bar his entrance. Za began spending more time in the backyard, sitting cross-legged on the grass with Rex beside her, hers lost on the horizon. Once Benjamin overheard her whispering to Rex, her voice too soft to discern when he questioned her. She laughed it off, calling it silly dog mom chatter. That truly unsettled Benjamin transpired during a seemingly trivial argument. A minor mix-up about dinner plans had escalated, fueled by the tension simmering between them for weeks. Despite his efforts to stay calm, Benjamin's frustration spilled over while Za stood firm, her expression resolute. Then Rex intervened. The dog, who had been quietly lying by the couch, rose and placed himself between them. He didn't growl or bristle, yet his presence was undeniably commanding. Rex's gaze was unwavering, silently urging Benjamin to proceed with caution. "Rex, move aside." Benjamin set his voice wavering, but Rex remained steadfast. Instead, he subtly turned his attention to Za, who gently placed a hand on his back. The gesture was small, yet it felt meaningful and intimate, as if they shared a silent dialogue that eluded Benjamin. "That's enough," Za interjected softly, her tone carrying a subtle authority that silenced Benjamin. Her expression was unreadable, yet her words lingered. This isn't about Rex, but to Benjamin it felt very much about Rex. That night, sleep eluded him. As he lay in bed, replaying the day's events over and over, Za slept soundly beside him, her breathing steady, yet the space between them felt insurmountable. At the foot of the bed, Rex lay curled up, eyes shut, though Benjamin couldn't shake the feeling that the dog was awake, silently vigilant. Eventually, Benjamin slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb Za. He wandered into the living room and sank onto the couch head in hands, feeling foolish and paranoid, yet unable to dismiss the unsettling sense that something was deeply amiss. As he sat there, he heard the soft padding of footsteps. He looked up to find Xa framed in the doorway, her silhouette illuminated by the streetlights. Outside Benjamin, she spoke softly, her voice weighted with an emotion he couldn't define. "Why are you out here?" she inquired. He hesitated, then gestured to the couch. "I couldn't sleep, too much on my mind." She joined him, sitting quietly with her hands in her lap for a while. Silence enveloped them. Then she broke it, saying, "I know you've noticed." About Rex. Benjamin's breath caught, turning to her, his heart clenched. "Ziza, what's happening? I need to understand." She met his gaze, her eyes shimmering with an unrecognizable emotion. "I've been trying to find the right way to tell you," she admitted softly. "But it's not something you'll grasp easily. Try me," he urged, his voice trembling. Za exhaled her gaze, drifting towards the hallway where Rex lay. "Rex isn't just a dog, Benjamin, he's more." Her words sent a chill down his spine, and as she continued, the unease that had shadowed him deepened into something profoundly unsettling. In the days following Zira's cryptic confession, Benjamin felt as though he was teetering on a trope in the dark. He couldn't shake the chill her words instilled. Rex isn't just a dog, he's more. The phrase echoed in his mind, an incessant tolling bell. He pressed for more answers that night, but evaded, claiming the timing wasn't right now. The enigma of her bond with Rex occupied his. The first fracture in their fragile facade of normalcy appeared one otherwise ordinary morning. Benjamin was making coffee, the grinder's hum punctuating the quiet kitchen. Za was outside with Rex, their silhouettes faint through the sliding glass door. She knelt on the grass, cradling Rex's face in her hands, her forehead resting against his. Benjamin paused, his hand suspended over the coffee maker. The scene was intimate, yet not in a typical way between a person and their pet. There was something deeper, almost sacred. In the way Za held herself, her lips moved silently, words lost to the distance. Yet Rex remained riveted, his gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that sent a chill through Benjamin. Unable to quell his growing curiosity, Benjamin stepped outside. Za remained focused on Rex, not acknowledging Benjamin's approach. The dog's ears twitched, but he stayed still, his eyes steady. "What are you doing?" Benjamin asked, his voice slicing through the tranquility. Za looked up, startled, and Rex immediately stood, positioning himself protectively. Za's expression hardened briefly, and Benjamin braced for a rebuke. Instead, she sighed her shoulders, drooping. "Benjamin," she said softly, standing up, "you shouldn't sneak up on us." "You didn't hear me come out," he replied, his tone sharper than intended. "Because you were what, meditating with Rex, talking to him like he's human." Zara's jaw tightened. "I told you there's more here than you know, and I want to understand." Benjamin said, frustration creeping in. "But you're shutting me out of something important. Something strange." Her eyes flicked to Rex, who sat beside her like a guardian. His amber eyes locked on Benjamin. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you everything, try me." Benjamin urged, his voice low, "Because right now, I don't know what to believe anymore." Za hesitated, absent, brushing her fingers through Rex's fur. "I'll explain," she finally said, "but not here, not now." Before Benjamin could argue, she turned and headed inside, Rex trailing behind her. The tension them grew. In the following days, Benjamin watched Za and Rex with increasing scrutiny, convinced there was something crucial he was missing. Every interaction seemed laden with unspoken significance, an invisible thread binding them in ways Benjamin couldn't comprehend. It wasn't just Za's habit of speaking to Rex as though he could reply, or how Rex seemed to anticipate her every need. It was the inexplicable synchronicity of their movements, as if they were connected by some unseen force. When Za was upset, Rex appeared at her side before Benjamin even noticed her mood shift. When she laughed, Rex's ears perked up, his tail wagging as if sharing in her happiness. One evening, unable to contain his frustration, Benjamin spoke up from his spot on the couch. "Za," he said, his voice cutting through the television's quiet hum. "What's really going on with you and Rex?" Za glanced up from the floor where she sat with Rex's head resting on her lap. She didn't answer immediately, her fingers weaving through his fur, slow, deliberate strokes. "Benjamin," she began cautiously, "you already know part of it. I've told you he's more than just a dog." "Yeah, you've said that," Benjamin replied, irritation edging his voice, "but you haven't explained what that actually means." Za hesitated, her gaze dropping to Rex. The dog looked up at her, his amber eyes revealing something Benjamin couldn't quite define. It was almost human. Za drew a deep breath, meeting Benjamin's eyes. "Rex isn't just a dog because his soul isn't confined to this form," she said softly. "He's someone I've known before. In another life." Her words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Heavy and charged, Benjamin stared at her, his mind racing. He wanted to dismiss her claim, to laugh it off as some bizarre joke, but the sincerity in her voice held him in place. "Another life," he echoed, his voice barely a whisper. "Za, what are you talking about?" Za reached for Rex, her hand resting on his head. "I know how it sounds," she said, "but I've felt it since the moment I saw him. He's not just a dog, Benjamin. He's someone I've been connected to across lifetimes." Benjamin shook his head, his ***T tightening. "This doesn't make any sense. You're telling me that Rex is reincarnated?" "Yes," she replied simply. "In every life, he's found his way back to me." Za continued the room, feeling claustrophobic and the air stifling. Benjamin stood, moving to the window as he struggled to process her words. "Za, this is..." I don't know how to take this. It sounds crazy. It's the truth, she insisted quietly. I've seen it in dreams. Glimpses of memories not from this life. In one, he was a knight shielding me in a war-torn village. In another, a scientist working alongside me in a future. We couldn't survive and now he's here. Benjamin turned to her, his breath ragged. You're telling me this dog is some eternal soulmate? I'm not asking you to believe anything, Za replied, her voice unwavering. I'm just sharing what I know. Benjamin ran a hand through his hair, torn between disbelief and a pang of jealousy. He wanted to dismiss her claims, yet her conviction unnerved him, and there was Rex sitting calmly by her side, watching Benjamin with an intensity that made his skin crawl. I need air, Benjamin muttered, grabbing his jacket and heading for the door. Outside the night was crisp and serene. Stars dotted the sky like scattered diamonds. Benjamin leaned against the porch, railing his thoughts, a chaotic jumble. He wanted to dismiss Za's words as nonsense, but certain aspects gnawed at him. The uncanny way Rex seemed to persevere his emotions, their seamless synchronicity. He lingered outside, lost in thought, until the sound of the door opening behind him caught his attention. Za stepped out, arms folded against the cold. Rex followed, seating himself at her feet like a loyal sentinel. I know this is difficult, Za said softly, but I need you to trust me. Benjamin met her gaze, a knot tightening in his ***T. I don't know if I can Z. This changes everything. It doesn't have to, she said, stepping closer. You don't need to grasp it all right now. Just don't leave us. Her plea lingered in the air, and Benjamin felt its weight pressing down on him. He glanced at Rex, whose eyes seemed to convey an almost human patience and understanding for the first time. Benjamin wondered if there was more to the dog's gaze than he'd allowed himself to see. The wind howled outside, its mournful wail, echoing the tension in the room. Benjamin sat across from Z at the kitchen table, his hands clenched into fists on the smooth surface. Rex lay beside her chair, his head on his paws, yet his eyes remained open, watching Benjamin with a perceptive gaze. All right, Benjamin said, breaking the silence. His voice was taut like a rope stretched to its limit. You promised an explanation, no more. Half-truths, no more. Cryptic comments. Just tell me everything. Za exhaled slowly, her fingers curling around the table's edge. You might not like it. Try me, he replied, though the knot in his stomach warned him he might regret it. She hesitated, looking at Rex, her eyes softening, as if drawing strength from him. Rex shifted slightly, his tail thumping once against the floor, a silent signal Benjamin couldn't decipher. When I met Rex, Za began, her voice low, I sensed something different about him. It wasn't just his intelligence or how quickly he connected with me. It was a feeling like I'd known him before. Benjamin raised an eyebrow but remained silent. Za's eyes flicked to him, her face pained. It didn't make sense. Initially, she continued, but then I started having dreams. Vivid dreams, more like memories in them. I was living different lives in various times and places in Rex. He was always there, always there. Benjamin echoed, skepticism lacing his voice. What does that even mean? Benjamin asked, struggling to comprehend. Za paused, her fingers, gently stroking Rex's fur. In some lives he wasn't a dog, he was a person. A knight who vowed to protect me during a medieval siege. A scientist partnering with me in a future we couldn't survive. A friend, a lover, a guardian, always the same soul, irrespective of the form. Benjamin blinked, his throat dry. Are you saying Rex has been reincarnated? Across lifetimes, and the three of you are soulmates? Yes. Za replied plainly. It's the only way it makes sense. Each time I lose him, he finds me again. This time he returned as a dog. Benjamin leaned back, his mind spinning. He wanted to laugh, to call it absurd, but the earnestness in Zira's voice held him silent. Do you hear yourself? He asked, his tone sharper than intended. You're claiming that the dog under your chair is the reincarnation of some long-lost lover. I'm saying he's more than just a dog. Zira responded steadily. You've seen it, Benjamin. The way he senses what I'm feeling before I even speak, the way he reacts to things he shouldn't understand. Haven't you ever wondered why? Benjamin opened his mouth to argue, but hesitated. He had wondered. He'd noticed how Rex seemed to sync perfectly with Za, anticipating her moods and needs. He'd brushed it off as a bond between a woman and her pet. But now, with Za's words hanging in the air, Those moments felt far less explainable. You're asking me to believe something impossible, he said. Finally. No, Z replied. I'm asking you to believe in something bigger than yourself, bigger than what you think you know. The room's atmosphere grew heavier, the silence between them charged with unspoken tension. Rex stood and moved to Za's side, sitting tall and steady like a sentinel. His amber eyes met Benjamin's, and for a moment Benjamin sensed an uncanny awareness in the dog's gaze. It wasn't just intelligence, it was something deeper, sending a chill down his spine. Zebra placed a hand on Rex's head in every life. He's been my protector. Sometimes he saves me. Sometimes I save him. But we always find each other. Benjamin ***T tightened. And what about me? He asked quietly. Where do I fit into all of this? Za's expression softened for the first time that night. She reached across the table, her hand brushing against his. You're here now, she said. You're part of this life, this story. I love you. Benjamin. That hasn't changed, but it's not the same, he said, pulling his hand away. How can I compete with a connection that spans lifetimes? You don't have to compete, Za said, her voice cracking slightly. This isn't about competition. It's about acceptance. I didn't choose this connection. Benjamin, it just is, but that doesn't mean I love you any less. Benjamin stood abruptly, pacing to the window the wind had picked up, rattling the panes as if echoing the storm inside him. He turned back to Za, his emotions, a tangled mess of jealousy, disbelief and something deeper, something he didn't want to name, and Rex. He gestured to the dog. What now? Am I supposed to coexist with him? Pretend this is normal? Nothing about this is normal, Za admitted. But it's real and I need you to trust me. Benjamin, please. Benjamin stared at her, his mind racing. He wanted to walk away, to leave the house, and the impossible truth she had laid before him. But as his gaze shifted to Rex, something stopped him. The dog watched him intently, his amber eyes filled with a quiet patience that was almost unbearable. It was as if Rex was waiting for Benjamin to see what Zira saw, to accept what couldn't be explained. I don't know if I can do this, Benjamin said. Finally, his voice cracking. Yukinzi, Za said, moving to his side. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch warm and grounding. Because I can't do this without you. Her words struck him more deeply than he anticipated, and for a moment the defenses he built around his heart began to crumble. He saw the raw vulnerability in her eyes, then glanced at Rex, who remained silent and steadfast. Okay, Benjamin said, the word laden with reluctance. Okay, but I need time, Z, to figure out how to handle all of this. Za nodded, her lips trembling with relief. Take all the time you need. Just don't shut me out. Benjamin caught Rex's gaze one last time, the dog's intense stare, sending a shiver through him. I won't, he promised, though uncertainty tinged his voice. As Za embraced him, Benjamin closed his eyes, the weight of the truth settling over him like a looming storm. He didn't understand. It didn't know if he ever would, but for now he chose to stay, and in that moment it was enough. The days following Z's revelation felt like navigating a minefield, each interaction with Benjamin charged with unspoken tension. The home, once filled with laughter and shared routines, seemed hollow, their cherished, quiet moments now bristled with unease, a pervasive sense of something broken, hanging in the air. And always there was Rex's steady, watchful presence, a comfort to Z, a point of contention for Benjamin. Benjamin avoided Z as much as he could, burying himself in work, taking extra hours at the office, and spending late nights in the garage, tinkering with tools that needed no fixing. Yet, no matter how he distanced himself, questions lingered, gnawing at him relentlessly. How could she love him and still feel so deeply connected to Rex? What did that make him? A placeholder, an outsider? One evening, as Benjamin sat in the garage nursing a beer, the door creaked open. Ziza stood silhouetted against the kitchen light, her expression hesitant, eyes searching his for a flicker of warmth that wasn't there. Benjamin, she said, softly stepping inside, we need to talk. He didn't look up. What's there to talk about? You already said your piece. I told you the truth, she said, her voice trembling slightly, but you've barely looked at me since you've barely been here. He set the beer down with a sharp clink. What do you want me to do? Za. Pretend everything's fine, that I'm okay sharing you with. He gestured toward the house, his voice cracking a dog. She said quietly, her face falling as if he'd struck her. It's not about sharing. You're twisting this into something. It's not. What am I supposed to think? He retorted, frustration spilling over. You told me Rex is some eternal soulmate, so that he's been there in every life you've lived. How am I supposed to compete with that? You don't have to compete, she said, stepping closer. This isn't a competition. Benjamin, it's a connection. One that doesn't take away from what I feel for you. He laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair. Do you even hear yourself? You're asking me to be okay with something that goes against everything. I know everything. I believe her shoulders sagged, and for a moment she was silent. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost pleading. I never asked you to believe, I just wanted you to trust me. That's hard to do when you've been hiding this from me for months. He snapped Za's gaze, hardened vulnerability, giving way to something sharper. Do you think I wanted this? She said, her voice rising. Do you think I wanted to feel torn between you and something? I don't fully understand myself. I told you the truth because I love you, Benjamin. Because I didn't want to lose you. Well, congratulations, he said, coldly, standing and moving toward the door. You've made it impossible for me to stay. The words escaped before he could stop them, and as soon as they hung in the air, he regretted them. Za flinched as if physically struck her breath. Catching in her throat for a moment, they remained motionless. Then, without another word, Benjamin brushed past her and walked into the night. In the days that followed, the distance between them widened. Za withdrew into herself, spending most of her time with Rex in the backyard or on long walks that Benjamin no longer accompanied. Benjamin stayed out late, returning home after Za had already gone to bed, the silence of their once shared life now deafening. Yet no matter how much he tried to suppress his feelings, Rex's presence loomed like a shadow. The dog seemed to sense the tension, observing Benjamin with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Every glance from those amber eyes felt accusatory, a silent reminder of the truth. Benjamin refused to confront. One night, as Benjamin sat alone in the living room, the sound of soft footsteps caught his attention. He turned to find Rex standing in the doorway, eyes fixed on him. There was something unsettling about the dog's gaze, calm, patient, as though waiting for Benjamin to break the silence. What do you want? Benjamin muttered, his voice laden with exhaustion. You here to tell me she's right? Rex neither moved nor barked or growled. He merely stood there, his tail swishing slowly against the floor for a brief, disorienting moment. Benjamin felt as though the dog understood him, listening in a way no human ever had. It sent a shiver down his spine. I don't know how to do this, Benjamin said quietly, more to himself than the dog. I don't know how to be enough when you've already been everything to her. Rex tilted his head slightly, a gesture so familiar it made Benjamin ch***** ache. He thought of all the times he'd seen Za speaking to Rex the way she leaned in and whispered secrets he had never heard. The jealousy flared once more, sharp and bitter, but this time it was accompanied by something else, a flicker of guilt. Was he truly losing Za to Rex, or was he pushing her away out of fear? The turning point came the following week. Benjamin had been avoiding another confrontation with Za, but when he came home late one night, he found her on the couch waiting for him. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a quiet determination in her eyes that filled him with unease. We can't keep doing this, she said, as he set his keys down, avoiding each other, pretending this will go away if we just stop talking about it. Benjamin sighed, running a hand through his hair. What do you want me to say, Za? That I'm fine with this? That I'm okay with whatever this is between you and Rex? No, she said, firmly. I want you to tell me how you feel. Really feel, no more deflecting, no more sarcasm. Just tell me the truth. He hesitated, his ch***t tightening. I feel like I'm losing you, he admitted. Finally, his voice cracking like I'll never be enough because there's a part of you that already belongs to him. Za's expression softened and she stood, crossing the room to stand in front of him. You're not losing me, she said quietly. But if you keep shutting me out, if you keep treating this like it's some kind of betrayal, you might. Her words struck him hard and he looked away, his throat tightening. I don't know how to trust this, Za. I don't know how to trust you. She reached for his hand, her touch warm and grounding. Then start small. She said softly, trust that I love you. Trust that I chose you for this life. Benjamin looked at her, his heart aching. He wanted to believe her, to let go of the fear and jealousy consuming him, but the fractures in their trust ran deep, and the path to mending them felt long. Still, for the first time in weeks, he nodded, "I'll try." It wasn't much, but it marked a beginning. As Za squeezed his hand, a flicker of hope ignited in the silence between them. The storm arrived suddenly, sweeping over the quiet suburb with a fierce intensity that felt almost supernatural. Lightning slashed across the sky, illuminating the landscape in stark, jagged flashes while thunder shook the windows of the house. Inside, Benjamin paced the living room, his movements restless as the storm mirrored the turmoil within him. Za had gone to bed hours earlier, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Rex lay on the rug, his head resting on his paws, his amber eyes following Benjamin's every move. The dog's calm presence should have been a comfort, but tonight it felt suffocating, like an unspoken challenge. Benjamin couldn't escape. "You don't make this easy, you know," Benjamin muttered, pausing to glare at Rex, who sat there as if he had it all figured out. Rex remained still, not even blinking. The quiet understanding in his eyes only deepened Benjamin's frustration. He turned away, his fists clenched at his sides as the storm raged outside. The accident happened just after midnight. Benjamin had finally decided to clear his head, grabbing his coat and stepping into the storm.
A small smile on my face as I turned back into the quiet house. The memories of those days, those quiet moments filled with laughter, conversation, and an unspoken bond, would stay with me, a reminder of the connection we had found and the possibilities that lay ahead. Leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel.